here.
Thank you very much for joining, everyone. We're very excited because today we're going to speak about a very important topic related to women's health, but also health in general of our population. So we have here with us Gita Incerti, that is the CEO and founder of the PQE Group, Renita Das, Global Healthcare and Life Science Partner and Senior Vice President at Frost & Sullivan, Professor Moshe Hod, who's here with us in the studio, which is the Chief Medical Advisor at the PQE Group, Karen Leshem, CEO and Director at Ocon Healthcare, and Anna Beatriz Quijara, which is the President-elect at FIGO. So it's very nice to have you all here with us. So we're going to cover different topics related to industry, economics, medicines, and trends of this very exciting growing market. So first of all, though, we would like to hear more from our audience and ask you with a direct poll to understand where you're coming from and what kind of field are you working on. So before we kick off, in order to have more details from you and manage the discussion a little bit better, I kindly ask to the team to send over a quick poll to ask you what kind of field are you currently working on. If you're part of a life science corporation, either pharma or big medical device corporation, if you are an investor, a medical device startup owner, or a biotech startup owner, a doctor, or other. So if you want to take a couple of minutes just to vote on this, then we can maybe focus the discussion later on, depending on our audience. Thank you. If it's possible also to see the results. Perfect. So we have a majority of life science corporate and biotech startup owner. So really, really interesting. Thank you. So I would like maybe to start off the discussion with Professor Moshe Hod. If you can give us a little bit of insight, what is FemTech, what kind of industry and products it covers, so we can set the pace and then proceed with the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for the introduction. It's our first webinar, and we'll try to bring you up to date on FemTech. As I've seen from your voting, there is no doctor here, so I really have to be very, very precise and define what is women's health. So it's mine. I'll explain. I'm a professor of obstetrics and gynecology, so that's why I'm working in this field of women's health for the last, I would say, almost 40 years. That's what's FemTech. And I'm lucky there is no doctor here because I don't want to make them, to make them feel bad. But if I'll ask the question, what's FemTech, in a Congress of physicians, about 95% won't know what is FemTech. Very, very few still now at 2023, mid-23, know what's FemTech. So we have to update everybody what is FemTech, and we would want to push this idea forward, why we need FemTech. So FemTech are innovative technologies designed to support, improve, and promote women's health. And promoting women's health is extremely important. How do you do it? You do it by technologies, by improving technologies, kind of software, diagnostics, products, and services. And what are the FemTech conditions that we have to work on? That's actually pregnancy and nursing care. Pregnancy can be normal pregnancy, it can be complicated pregnancy, menstruation care, fertility solution, and reproductive health, cancer care, and all the female organs can be affected by cancer, ovaries, uterus, cervix, the cervix of the uterus, pelvic diseases like endometriosis, and I'll expand about a bit endometriosis a bit later, osteoporosis, contraceptives, and even non-communicable diseases. We'll speak about it a bit later, but defining medically what's FemTech is everything that deals with products designed to improve women's healthcare.
Thank you. And this word, I think, was coined from Ida Team, right, in 2016.
Yeah, perfect. Very, very good. Historically, until 2016, FemTech didn't exist. Ida Team, a Danish entrepreneur, she actually defined FemTech in 2016. And it's very important to know about it because women were actually underrepresented, understudied in most of the clinical trials, big pharma trials, big industry trials, and it all started in 1977. If you go back to 1977, it's almost 50 years. At that year, the FDA excluded women, intentionally excluded women for taking part in clinical trials. And the reason for it, why it came out in 77, because still the disaster of thalidomide was very, very fresh, I would say, this time. Thalidomide caused a lot of problems to the fetus. So 77, and it was, the ban was actually discontinued only in 1993, which means 30 years ago, FDA removed the banning, and since then, women are more represented now in clinical trials. So we can say that it improved, but still not where we want it to be.
Still, though, we can, is it correct to say that most of the products developed in those years were mostly designed for men?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thomas, you're absolutely right. Most of it was based on men's studies. Women, as I said, were excluded from the studies, and there were two reasons for it. The industry didn't want to expose women, fertile women, to pregnancy using the drug at that time. And they were thinking that menstruation, the cycle, can affect the study design.
Right.
So they excluded them for these two reasons from clinical trials.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Moshod, for underlining and highlighting this. And going back to, so we spoke about clinical trials. Giuda Incerti, my question for you is how important is the collection of data, which is of course a major issue, especially in clinical trials, to speed up drug development? And what's your insight on this and how it can be developed and also highlighted nowadays, maybe thanks through digitalization or decentralized studies?
Okay, thank you, Thomas. This gives me the opportunity of speaking about data quality, which is a broader concept than just quality inside the life science, okay? Especially in this historical moment where digital transformation is touching every point of our lives, and the new technologies such as the blockchain, AI, deep learning are entering more and more in products we are using every day. It is mandatory to assure the integrity of data, meaning with this, the quality of the same, the security of data, and the ownership of data. So let's say clinical trial have been regulated since a long time, especially in the pharma space. But I think that it is very, very important to make this concept to be applied also in earlier phase, in the phase of, let's say, the beginning of the cycle where there is a research phase, the first data are collected, and also very important in what are called the real world data. So data collected once the product, either a medical device or a pharma, is on the market. So let's say to apply some of the good practice developed inside pharma, but also in other regulated industries to this, let's say, research phase and to the post-marketing phase in order to collect a big database for really applying AI tool, for example, to something that is meaningful, because the risk of the new technology is that this technology, if not controlled in the proper way, they can produce data that are ambiguous or
hard to interpret,
not possible to be utilized later.
And I think it's important also to highlight the fact that quality of data has to be very much improved also in R&D phases, because most of the startups, sometimes they don't collect data, so they cannot get maybe from phase 2 to phase 3. So it's important to have a robust system.
Absolutely. I think it's important to change the paradigm from doing quality because you have to submit, because you have a law requiring it, to collecting data because it make good research and business sense. Okay. Yeah. So for this reason, I think also very interesting the new regulation on medical device in Europe that, let's say, ask for clinical evidence based on studies for 2B and 3 medical device categories, but also in general, I think that a more, let's say, more knowledgeable data produced also during the proof of concept could increase not only the value of the research, but also the final result.
The final result of the government. Thank you very much. And since we are speaking about also final results, and because the FemTech products, devices, and drugs are actually a big chunk of our sector of the health and well-being of women. So I maybe would like to ask to Ms. Renita Das, you can please see us or hear us. Can you hear us correctly?
Sure, I can.
Hey, Renita, first of all, thank you again for joining. Welcome to the discussion today. So, part of so I know that you're working a lot on analyzing this market, and you have a lot of insights of the trends of what is the bigger picture of the SHEconomy. So, can you please maybe give us a description first of what's the SHEconomy and how it is looking over at this sector, and what's the growth of this industry?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me here. Appreciate it, PQE. I tracked the women's health industry for more than 2.5 decades. And if I actually think back, the whole concept of the SHEconomy, we started studying in the early 2000s around, I think the word was coined in 2007 or something by economists. But it was really a mega trend, and mega trends are really very large transformative forces that have impact on different aspects of human life, whether it's social, political, economic. I mean, they're profound impact that it'll have. So when the economists in 2007 started coining the term, they were looking just really at female participation in different aspects of the economy. So in participation in retail and consumer, in entertainment, in travel and mobility, in wellness and healthcare and all of these areas. I think at that point, we never really estimated the huge impact that the SHEconomy would have. And today I don't even talk about the SHEconomy anymore because it's so restrictive with so many pronouns available like she, the, they, and her. You know, how can we even have a discussion on the SHEconomy anymore? But just to clarify, what exactly is it? Where does it come from? And where are we today? So if we fast forward to 2023, 15 years since it was coined, I think we've made a huge leap. And today the SHEconomy has, you know, if you look at the asset valuation of it from a commercial point of view, we are larger than the GDP of the 2 largest countries of the world, US and China. If we combine women's spending in these areas, we are larger. So what really changed in the last 15 years? What has been that development and that evolution? So I think there's been a couple of reasons. The first, I think, has been access to education. We've seen that overall, there's more women who are going into schools, who are graduating, who are taking advanced degrees. 2019 was a hallmark year for the United States, where we saw more women having bachelor's degrees than men in the United States. And obviously that is continuing to escalate by 5 to 10% every year. So we have more women who are being educated, more women who are going into the career work field and working. We're also seeing a huge amount of change in terms of different choices that women are making. For example, more women are preferring to be single and childless. We did a study recently in the United States among women 25 to 44 years old, and we found that 45% of them were single and without children. So that's a huge transition in the future of where the world is going to be and who the new woman is going to be. So this is one choice. The second choice is the average age of marriage has extended. 5 years ago, the average age was 22 years old. Now we're at 28. We're expecting by 2030, it's going to go up to 35 years. So it's really, really changing dramatically. And we have to really meet the needs of this changing new woman. The other big area that we've seen change is that women are the primary consumers for almost every field, whether it's healthcare, we're the primary consumers, car buying, real estate, consumer electronics. I mean, every single thing we're increasing. We're also seeing the number of women-funded unicorns have increased tremendously in the last 5 years. So there's a huge potential for that increase, and that increase has really spearheaded all aspects, whether it's fintech, whether it's healthcare, whether it's mobility, whether it's industrial, whether, every industry. We're really looking at women as a target audience and a consumer buyer, and we're 4.3 billion of us in the world today. So that's a huge chunk. We're 51% of the world. So that is a huge chunk of money that could be invested into this segment. So I think that's where we are today in terms of the SHEconomy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Renita. This was, really interesting to hear as this industry is really changing rapidly. And speaking about the industry and all the technology and products out there, and thinking, I would like to maybe jump to Karen Leshen now, who's the CEO of a technology pioneer, as stated by the World Economic Forum at Ocon. So, Karen, what is the role of technology? And also, while Renita was speaking, we have also to consider that medical device and medtech is a huge increasing trending topic in the future. There is way more research and development around the medical device. So, what do you think we should foresee as a jump into this field? And what do you think is the role of technology in women's health?
So first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to see everybody. And Renita, thanks for all the data that you provided. Super interesting. Ocon Healthcare is a woman-led, woman-focused company. And within our 85% women group, we see exactly these trends. We see the women that, marry later, the women that are mothers later, the women that choose not to be mothers. It's all a little SHEconomy here at Ocon. So it's actually nice to hear some data. So thank you for that. I want to be a little bit more provocative or controversial, if I may. I come from the industry itself, and we really want to see a lot more research and a lot more data around women's specific diseases, indications, conditions. And these are not only things that relate to specific organs that we have, like the uterus or any other organs, but also diseases that affect women differently, such as heart attacks, such as bone health. And so this is where, I live, and this is what I wish to promote in addition to Ocon. I'm a mentor at 8400. It's the biggest health network here in Israel. I also sit on the NIH and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to really drive focus on what studies and money should look like in the next 5 to 10 years. We also do that as part of the World Economic Forum. I sit on a board of a Swiss company in this field, and so I'm very, very involved in what's going on in the industry. And so I feel that I want to be very, provocative or controversial, because it's very hard to push clinical data for women specifically when we are still considered somewhat of a niche, which makes me laugh because we're over 50% of the population. And where I want to be, more provocative is say, I want to stop calling it FemTech, or I want to stop calling it women's health, and I want to start calling it population health, because when you look, and there was a recent LinkedIn article by a very good friend and colleague, Gila Talub. She wrote that she was in a conference recently where a woman said that 1% of the population suffer from Crohn's disease. Everybody knows what Crohn's disease is. But if we look at a disease like endometriosis, which 10% of women suffer from, today it's even believed more, but let's take 10%. That's 5% of the population, right? If we take 50% of women. And so we need to start talking about population health and not about women's health. And I think that will drive a lot more interest and a lot more money into looking at this blue ocean of opportunities. Because when you look at investments into the field, and investments need to come so that we can do these clinical studies, and investments need to come so that we can grow companies and grow ideas to treat 51% of the population. I think we need to start talking about population health. And when we do that, we can add up so many different types of cancers, and they affect, 3% of the population, up to 7% of the population. Think of any cancers that you can think of. But when we look at uterine fibroids, right? These are the non-cancerous tumors that grow in 7 out of 10 women. 70% of women will have a fibroid by the age of 50. 8 out of 10 women of color. This is 35 to 40% of the population. It's huge. It's more than any, cancers combined together. Of course, uterine fibroids don't kill, but it's a huge impact on the quality of life of women, on how we are able to work, on how we're able to function, on how we're able to be mothers and sisters and daughters and mates and you name it, and employees and bosses. And so I really want to bring forward the idea of population health versus just women's health. I believe that we need to start speaking in those terms in order to get a lot more attention. Because, when you have such huge market shares of a condition or a indication or a disease, and very little competition, right? There's not 7 different drugs, in the pipeline to treat some of these diseases. I think that's where investors can come in and say, wow, we have a huge market. There's not a whole lot of competition, and we need to invest in order to be able to get as much hold into this huge opportunity. I hope that answered your question.
No, that you did even more. I mean, I think it's really important, because what we're doing here, we are not just talking about FemTech, but we're talking about what's next. So what we drive is to kind of try to change the paradigm as well as we are here today. So we also wanted to look at what's next in the future. Unfortunately, one of our speakers maybe couldn't join for technology issue, for network issue. I don't think and Chiara, unfortunately, has joined. But I would like maybe to ask to Professor Hod, if you can please give us an understanding of what's FIGO, because Anne-Chiara is the president-elect next October of FIGO, which is a global organization. So as we want people to be aware of what's the work of this association, if you can please give us maybe a quick overview and definition.
Yeah, I'll do it. Gladly do it. It's unfortunately Anne is based in Kenya, and she was supposed to be in a tour with the Kenyan Minister of Health, so she probably can't connect, and that's a pity. FIGO is the Global Female Women's Health Organization. FIGO stands for the International Federation of Obstetrics and Gynecology, which means this is the association, the organization that deals with every issue in female health. It produces guidelines, it produces best practice advice, and it's actually being represented by 135 nations. It's kind of a UN, global UN of women's health. So FIGO is extremely important, and we have Anne-Chiara on board, and she's going to be the first African lady that will be the president of FIGO. Never happened before. So finally, FIGO is being now run by, now the president is Jean Conry, she's from the United States, but from October, we'll have an African lady to run the Global Association of Women's Health. And Africa is still considered a low-income country, so the issues there in Africa are extremely, extremely important, and they are very different from what we have in our countries, in high-income countries, in Italy, in the United States, in Europe, in Israel, in my country. So yes, we are very, very lucky to have Anne-Chiara on board and to collaborate with us, and we are going to do a lot of new things together in the near future.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, we don't have Anne with us, but she'll be later.
Awesome. Thank you very much for giving us this overview, because I think emerging countries still, will be the most populated countries in the world in the near future. Aging and of course, childbirth are decreasing, for example, in Europe, United States. So of course, Asia, Africa, and South America will be, of course, the biggest
Absolutely.
chunk of the population in the near future. So we are speaking about emerging countries and emerging cultures as well. So
And emerging markets,
completely. The landscape will change completely. And what do you think are the main, so speaking about the pipeline, what's next for this kind of products related to women's health? So where do you think are we going? Where
are we headed?
Where are we headed now? What's next? What's in the future?
First, I would like to, I'm taking a very big chance here, but I'm not agreeing totally with my good friend Karen Leshem about the public the public issue, to take it to global. But knowing Karen, I don't want to start a debate, but still.
we could.
Yeah, we could.
Not yet.
But if we are going to leave FemTech, I think that we are going to lose something. Because right now we are gaining a lot by defining a position that women are underrepresented in clinical trials. So what if we push forward this word FemTech and women's health, we are pushing actually the pharma, the industry, the global organizations to recognize that we have to invest much more money in representation of women in all our studies and to bring up solutions for women's needs. And I absolutely agree that we don't have to concentrate on the female organs, the reproductive organs, diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and many other what we call non-communicable disease are absolutely different in women than in men.
Right.
So we have to concentrate on the symptoms and signs and solutions and pharma, even for women in global diseases that affect men and women. So what is the next step? And that's why I'm very glad to collaborate with PQE, because PQE is a global company represented in 26 states, nations, and bringing up solutions for compliance, for digital compliance and digital globalization. Now, by joining forces with us, I think that we are going to push forward new ideas, kind of management with cannabinoids. We are pushing forward the idea that cannabinoids are going to be the next generation of drugs. So PQE and Gyneka, an Israeli-based company, are going to create and push forward a clinical trial that will deal with endometriosis. Karen mentioned endometriosis, 10% of the female population, which means 5% of the global population. And there is no pharma yet, no pharma to deal with endometriosis. We study the cannabinoids pharma properties, and we truly believe that in the pharma of cannabinoids, there are receptors that are actionized that can be used for the management of endometriosis. And I declare here that we are going to start the first clinical trial here in Italy, in Florence, in the Correggi Hospital, using a vaginal application of cannabinoids for the management of endometriosis. And I hope that we'll be able to report to you in one of our next webinars the results of this study.
Thank you. I hope so. And this actually leads me to another question I have for you, Gilda, because speaking about, for example, cannabinoids and data collections from different countries, there is actually a big gap in the regulation now. So there is a gap in regulation out there. So how can we fill this gap, also keeping in mind that there are emerging countries like Africa that are also lacking of regulations. So there is an infrastructure here that is missing to optimize also research in clinical trials.
Yes, you raise many issues in one question. I think that one point is speaking of a low medium income country, it would be very important to have common rules and guidance related to not only clinical trial, but also the management of data based on which the decisions are taken. Okay, so it will be important also in Africa to support the different countries for implementing models such as the WHO, but also for creating local guidance clearly consistent with the one, and there are many already used in Europe and US. The other aspect is, as I said, related to new technology. The new technology needs a incredible, huge amount of money for producing statistically significant results. Okay, in a sense, in this moment, everybody is speaking about artificial intelligence, and there is a lot of fear, but also a lot of faith. So the algorithms in themselves are neither good nor bad, but The point is that for reaching, let's say, the full power of the algorithm, you need to feed the algorithm in order to have the system learning with a huge amount of qualified and consistent data. So for doing this, you need to collect them in the proper way, and maybe it's not enough in one country, it's not enough in one study, but you have to create coalition at the research level for creating the critical mass that allows to produce significant results. Clearly, you mentioned the subject of cannabinoids. Cannabis in itself is one of the most complicated, let's say, plant in terms of the quantity of active principle inside the plant. The great public is speaking just of THC and CBD, but actually the active ingredient could be 120. And on the other, let's say, end of the spectrum, it could be used not only for pain, like in the case of endometriosis, but for a huge variety of diseases. So you understand that the combination of the genetic complexity with the let's say, therapeutic complexity makes this problem not possible to be solved by a simple software. So only a complicated algorithm could make the job. A reason more for having these common regulation, common standard that allow us to create a huge database based on which actually these software that already exist could be used.
Thank you, Gida. We're speaking a lot about technology today. So, technology is what's next for sure. So technology is mandatory, and we need to make sure to find the right technology. And this brings me back actually to Karen. What do you think? How can technology support innovation in the near future in this space?
So first of all, to talk about the regulatory aspects of medical devices, drugs, pharmaceuticals, drug device combinations, even diagnostics. I think that most countries in the world either are supported or follow a CE mark, or
right,
are either supported and follow an FDA approval. And so it makes it very difficult for startups and for companies that want to assess clinical information on a very diverse group of people, like in Africa, to go to those countries where the regulatory approvals are not initiated, right? They're more initiated in the United States and, as I mentioned, in Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, but that's where most of the data needs to come from in order to get those regulatory approvals. So later companies, for example, like Ocon, can start commercializing their products in other countries, such as South America, such as the Far East, and even in Africa, given those regulatory approvals. That makes it very difficult, to really go into low to mid-income countries and create impact with these products, where women have a very hard time getting access to any new type of medication. They have a very hard time to get access to pharmacies and access to clinics or hospitals. And when you see new devices and therapeutics come out into the market, for example, like Ocon's little balls that treat various indications in the uterus, these don't require an ongoing pharmaceutical or pharmacy subscription. They don't require a hospital. They don't require a lot of other subsets and costs. It's very hard to bring these innovations in a clinical setting to those types of territories. And so this is something that would require probably governments and more funding to allow us to do so. So this is one. But two, I really think that when we are able to standardize clinical data and make sure it's real data, and to make sure that it's substantial, and to make sure that it's optimized with help such as groups, big groups like PQE, that have a foothold worldwide that really assists companies to make sure that the data is reputable, that the data is collected in a very standardized manner, because we can't fail and we can't have data that is half okay or done a little bit different than required. And we see today in all medical devices and drugs and pharmaceuticals that regulation is becoming very strict. We see the transition in Europe from MDD to MDR. We see with FDA and very strict guidelines on how to get products approved there. China is a different story. Japan is a different story. Brazil is a different story. And so we will need the support of bigger footprints in order to be able to get, these products to a clinical evaluation. And then, of course, to the market. So there's a lot of work to be done.
There's definitely a lot of work, Erin, and also guidelines and also laws will definitely improve given the recent trends of digital technologies, AI. As I was also thinking about connected devices, and now those devices are actually able to, scan and actually access patients' data. So of course, the more the technology becomes complicated, the more, of course, guidelines and rules will follow. So definitely it is a challenging environment, but it's also challenging from an investment perspective, as you just mentioned. Also to find, for small startups, to find investments and to find investors in that area. Maybe we can now go back to Renita, because Renita, you are the one setting us on the bigger picture, on the big overview of the market. Because when Karen was speaking about investment, it came to my mind to ask you, where are the investments going? What do you think, and what are the trends in this economy? What do you think we should expect from this economy in terms of boom in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. And thank you, Karen, for your insights. They're very, very helpful. Just to take off where Karen left off, I think if we look at global demographic trends of where the world is going, emerging markets is going to have the larger portion of women in the future. These markets are growing almost by 5 to 10% more than the developed world. So the world of women are going to be really coming out of Africa, Asia, Latin America. These are the countries that the world of women are coming out of. So if you look at this world of women coming out of these countries, 50 to 60% don't even have access to healthcare. And then even if we get them access, who pays for it is the big question that we're facing. So we might be having all the technologies of the world being developed by Western countries, but they are of no use in many of these economies that we are seeing. So what we really see moving forward is that these economies are now beginning to invest and build their venture funds, build their private equity funds, build a backbone for financial capital into startups. So there's a huge tsunami going on in many of these countries, not so much in Africa, but I would say if you look at India, China, Vietnam, Cambodia, all of these countries, there's a huge development of technologies that are being developed for suiting local markets at local prices. But of course, the question of regulation will always be there in this aspect. So I do believe access is a big challenge for women as we move forward, and we have to think about more public-private partnerships. I was in Saudi Arabia last week in a forum where we were discussing how we could build some of these private-public partnerships to be able to give access to women in rural areas, and how do we do that? And I really think that it's not the duty of the government, nor is it the duty of private companies to do it. We have to build consortiums. We have to take nonprofit organizations, World Bank, etc., and create those consortiums around women. And the work has begun to start, but it's still a long way to go. And another point I wanted to bring up is that so far in FemTech, we've really focused on reproductive health, on menstruation, on those kind of areas. And I think we have to stop having that conversation because we've done it for a very long time. We have to now move beyond the uterus and the breast to really the organs and the areas that are women-centric, which are not really being, we're not there yet. For example, cardiovascular disease, it's much more apparent in women than men. For example, dementia, if you're looking at a world today that is graying overall, 1 in 4 women will get dementia. And we don't even understand that. And dementia in women and dementia in men are very different. So a lot of the work today that I'm working on is looking at these areas that are really not, that have been left behind. And now I'm trying to bring focus into that. And I do believe that there will be huge opportunities, commercial opportunities for companies if they start focusing on it in the next 5 to 10 years, they'll be able to reap the rewards. So I really see them as the big growth opportunities and money spinners in the future, if you're really looking at it from a money point of view.
No, definitely. Please, Moshe.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Renita. We have to forget about the uterus and the organs disease. That's why we are leading, and we have done it via FIGO, NCDs, non-communicable diseases. And we have to remember, it's a life cycle approach, which means most of the non-communicable diseases that you mentioned, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, even dementia, are being programmed and imprinted during pregnancy. We can't forget it. So it starts with a woman with a pregnancy, but this lady actually takes control of 2 lives, herself and the fetus that's growing there. Both of them are exposed to critical conditions that can actually influence their short-term outcome during pregnancy, but their long-term outcome, which means their disease state after 10, 15, and 20 years. So yes, we have to move from the uterus to the next stage, which means the non-communicable disease prediction and prevention, and it has to be aimed to women's health via pregnancy. So I absolutely agree with you that we have to move forward to other conditions and other diseases.
Thank you. No, thank you for this, because that was actually my next question for you.
Yeah.
So where do you see, let's say, in terms of, the biggest challenge we already know. So we spoke about the fact that many diseases, of course, are different in men and women because our body reacts differently. Then we spoke about, investments and how can we kind of meet the gap where there's a lot of Western countries producing that have the money to produce and invest and do research and development, but actually the end users, then the consumers are not in the same countries, are in other countries. So there's a lot of topics out there, but if you only had one last comment, what do you think, speaking about the future and tomorrow?
Again, I agree with Renita. It will be very difficult to work through the organizations like the United Nations, like the Ministries of Health. It has to become more and more directed toward private and public organizations, NGOs. And I know that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are investing a huge amount of money by bringing these technologies to low and middle income countries, what they call LMICs. Take, for example, pregnancy. We have every year about 135 million deliveries globally. Out of these 135 million, 10 million are in high income countries, 5 million in Europe, and 5 million in the United States, which means 125 million deliveries are actually taking place in low and middle income countries. India only 30 to 40 million deliveries. So there is no way the money will move. Something will have to be changed, and to produce tools and technologies that can be used for the desired price, for the desired investment in these countries. There is no point in producing guidelines in the high income countries and leaving the low and middle income countries without any solution. So yes, we are moving there. And I believe that together with PQE and the robust, I would say, traditional background that PQE have in many 26 countries, we'll try to find a solution to how to enter Africa, how to enter India, and bring up solutions that will actually end up in the right regulation as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Moshe. I really like the fact that we are changing the focus on the future. Gilda, do you have any last comment on what we just discussed?
No, I think that it will be very important also to bring the attention to the commercial opportunities of all these, because it's not only, let's say, related to health, women health, and women health in low medium income countries. There is a huge commercial opportunities. Okay, so let's say I think it's important to move the idea from just an ethic idea, something related with quality, which looks like something very theoretic in a sense, to something that can become a real life opportunity, both for patients and for investors.
For investors, yes. And we were speaking also about, putting together public and private. So also partnership will be overall important, paramount important also in the future, I think, in this. And maybe can we do a final roundtable with Karen and Renita? Karen, do you have any last comment? What do you see in the future? How can we overcome this challenge?
Well,
Out of the menu that we have, do you have?
well, I'm a very optimistic person. It's in my DNA. So I'm already seeing a lot of change and growth. And I'm meeting a ton of entrepreneurs, and I'm meeting with investors, and we are getting invested. And so I'm very, very optimistic. There's still a lot of work to be done, because we're really, in essence, creating a new category. Even though we're not new, but it's a new category of the way we look at, human trials and the body and the population. And so I'm very optimistic, and I'm happy to be part, of the discussions around women's health. And I will do my part to push as much as I can to make sure that that we all, benefit from new therapeutics and new devices and new diagnostics. But thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karen. I think the team is just communicating with us that Anna Kihara had the chance to join us. So, Anna, are you online? Can you hear us? Can you see us?
I can. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hi.
I had challenges with connectivity, but finally gotten in. I want to just say two things. Equity of FemTech as a solution pathway for particularly low middle income countries. I see this as a great opportunity for change and for actually improving the health dynamics of the women in low middle income countries. So I'm very excited about this particular arm of directing towards women everywhere and having quality at the centerpiece, even with the technologies that we will be introducing and the research arm opportunities that are being presented with FemTech.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very glad that you could join us. So we spoke a lot about you and Professor Moshe what FIGO is. But also I would like to hear from you. What is your mission now at FIGO? What do you foresee in the future?
First and foremost with FIGO is we do have scientific committees that have been very technical in terms of offering guidelines, but we do have challenges with technology. And as I speak, I certainly want to be the initiator of having a significant committee that will be addressing technology in female health, hopefully led by Professor Moshe, who we are seated with. But again, I cannot ignore the fact that even as we introduce technology, is the quality and even putting the tech skills to the palm of women's hands in low middle income countries. I am particularly wary and at the same time concerned that the adolescent and youth who really are the spearheaders in the energy of use of technology, getting that energy directed to technology that will serve a lot of their clinical purposes, but also inform diagnostics and then service delivery. So how do we bring it to the centerpiece as opposed to something that has been renegated in the periphery? I think that's what's most important at this point in time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comment, and it was a pleasure to have you. And I think we can close it here. So thank you. I would like to thank all the speakers that joined today. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Renita, and thank you, Anna, for connecting with us. We are all from different time zones and different countries, so thank you for the time to be with us. And thank you to Professor Mosciode and Gina Lincerti for joining the discussion. I just want to remind everybody that we're going to continue also with another episode of FemTech Next in the next months. So hope to see you again very soon. I wish you a very good day ahead. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Very much.
So bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.